Atheist Alliance International Podcast with Andy Phillips.
I don't make this stuff up.
You know, if you put Jesus Christ first, that he'll look after all your bills.
It's not fake, it's faith.
Hi, you're listening to the Atheist Alliance International Podcast with me, Andy Phillips. This is the podcast that rotates around or within the sphere of atheism, secularism and humanism. And in the next hour, we have an interview with Aroup Chatterjee, the author of the book, The Untold Story, which challenges the perceptions of Mother Teresa. Now, you may be aware of the documentary Christopher Hitchens did in the mid-90s that exposed the truth behind Mother Teresa and the home of the dying in Calcutta. Well, Aroup Chatterjee was a doctor in Calcutta, a resident of Calcutta, who on his arrival in the UK in the mid-80s was completely dismayed at the way that she was perceived. And also the deceptive view that she gave of her work and of Calcutta in general. He was the person who instigated the Channel 4 documentary that Hitchens ended up fronting. And we're going to be talking to him in about 15 minutes. But first, I want to introduce the Vice President of Atheist Alliance International, which is Bill Flavell, if I get it right, get my teeth in. Hi, Bill. How are you doing?
Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Now, I want to give a bit of an update on some of the work the organisation does and some of the ongoing cases, maybe, if we can talk about them, because sometimes we can't talk about them because of just the problems that it could cause down the line. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you do and some of the others in the organisation and some of the things that you're dealing with on a daily basis. Can you just give us a bit of a picture of some of the things that the organisation is involved with?
Yeah. You know, I wonder if it's a good idea to go back a step and think about what AAI is really all about, why we do it anyway. We're really about the right to be secular. All around the world, there are plenty of places where it's literally impossible or it's very, very hard to have no religion. There are places where you can be executed for leaving a religion or for saying bad things about a religion. So, although we do quite a number of things, like we help people who are in trouble, one of the things that's the underlying thing that, if you like, the theme of AAI is the right to be secular. We should all be free to have no religion if we want to. And I sometimes think about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I know that this is a bit geeky, I know it was proclaimed on the 10th of December, 1948. Now, I'm kind of cheating because I was born in the same year, so I won't.
Right, so that's how you remember it.
Exactly. So, like the Declaration, I'm 72 years old, and so is the Declaration. And that was a fundamental, important modern document for human rights. The foundation, really, of all the human rights documents we now have.
Yeah.
So it had said things like, important things like Article 7, we should all be equal before the law. Simple, but that's not the case at the moment, because people who have no religion are in many countries treated terribly before the law and are discriminated.
I don't think people understand this, though, do they, Bill? I mean, I don't think people really understand that there is it's like when I first joined Atheist Alliance International, I had a sort of inkling of some of those things that were going on, but I never really understood it that well because I was brought up in the UK. I was brought up C of E. You know, you can't get much more mild than that. And I've never really been a theist. I've always been an atheist. And, you know, you don't realise that there are, or it doesn't really sort of come over to you very easily, that there are places in the world that it is a danger to your life to just not believe in something supernatural, which seems completely bloody bizarre to me.
Crazy, yeah. So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, it is actually a terrorist offence to be an atheist. Get your mind around that.
But this is the problem. I can't get my mind around it. I don't understand why it is such a problem, apart from that they may think it breaks down society somehow. Yeah,
I think that's it.
That's the biggest thing for us, isn't it? You know, the right to be secular is that there's a movement. If you go onto the Atheist Alliance International website, you'll find the right to be secular stuff on there, and you can join up to it, can't you?
Yeah. So the thing about the Universal Declaration is Article 18 gave us freedom of thought and conscience and religion, and Article 19 gave us freedom of expression. So that declaration throughout it protects the right to be religious. And that's right. We totally agree with that. You need to have a right to be religious, and that right has to be protected. But nowhere does it say there's a right to not be religious. And I think that's where the problem comes in. There are countries where you have to have your religion on your birth certificate on the day you're born. So before you can think, before you can speak, you become a Muslim or a Christian or whatever. So we think there should be explicitly a right to be non-religious. And we have a campaign that we call the right to be secular. And at the moment, we're in the early stages of that campaign. We're just trying to make people aware. We're trying to generate support publicly for that. And the next stage, we'll be starting to canvass support within the organisations such as the United Nations, the European Commission on Human Rights, the African Commission on Peoples and Human Rights. So we're going to those kind of bodies because we need some kind of actual declaration that you do have a right to be secular, non-religious.
It does seem that it's such a hole in that whole legislation that there's no right to just not to believe in something. It just makes a mockery of reality. Just don't get it at all. So, but if you go to the Atheist Alliance International website, which is atheistalliance.org, have a look at campaigns, and the very first one in there is the right to be secular. Take a look at it and have a look at what you need to do. But if you can join in with that, then that'd be fantastic. Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you do, some of the work that you do in blasphemy law, because blasphemy law is sort of big at the moment, especially in some parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, as I said, Article 19 of the Universal Declaration is about freedom of expression. And that should mean that if we have an opinion, we should be free to express it. But that's not the case in some places. And where we're doing the most work at the moment, or I personally am doing the most work, is in Nigeria. You may know that the 12 northern states in Nigeria are overwhelmingly Muslim, and the southern states are overwhelmingly Christian. The country as a whole is hugely religious, with about 97% of the people saying religion is important to them in their everyday lives.
Right.
So we've had a few cases now coming up in particularly in Kano State in northern Nigeria. And the first one was a young man, 23 years old. He was a musician, and he said some things on a WhatsApp chat that people took exception to. And he was taken before the courts. And on the 10th of August this year, he was found guilty of blasphemy, and he was sentenced to death by that court. Now, it isn't just the fact that blasphemy is a ridiculous thing to charge anyone with. It is the fact that throughout the whole case, this poor gentleman, his name was Yahya Sharif Aminu, he had no legal support. He was not allowed to see his family. He had to manage on his own. He was sentenced to death. He's still kept incommunicado. So that means his chances of having someone launch an appeal for him was close to zero. He had 30 days. They gave him, incidentally, you're supposed to get 90 days in Nigerian law, but they gave him 30 days to appeal. It was obvious to us when we saw this case in the newspapers that the guy was not going to find anyone to appeal for him. And the governor of the state was making it very clear on social media that he wanted Yahya dead. He wanted to sign the execution warrant. So at that point, we decided that we should do something to help the guy. And we know some lawyers in Nigeria, so we asked them to put together an appeal, which they did, and they filed it before the deadline for the appeal. We also filed a stay of execution. So today, Yahya is safe. However, we now have to go through the whole process of taking forward the appeal, standing up in court. The cases will be heard in Kano, which is an extremely hostile environment for people who are protecting people from blasphemy.
Yeah.
You've probably heard of the cases of lawyers being killed in Pakistan if they protect people, defend people who are being accused of blasphemy. Similar things have happened in Kano. People have been beaten to death and hacked to death in the streets by mobs in Kano because they're accused of blasphemy. So very, very much religious tension around the subject of blasphemy in Kano. We have filed the appeal, but the next step is now we will get a date for the court case, and then we will have to get lawyers there and somehow keep them safe while they argue the case against the sentence.
There's also a case at the moment going on of a 13-year-old boy who's been sentenced to 10 years in prison. Can you give us a bit of an update on that?
Yeah, that's a young boy called Umar Farouk, and apparently he was having an argument with a friend and said something anti-God, and this was reported to the religious police, and he was taken away. I believe he was 12 when the offence or alleged offence happened.
Right.
But on the same day he was found guilty of blasphemy. He was given 10 years with menial labour in prison. He survived the death sentence because he's young, but it's kind of astonishing that you would sentence a 13-year-old boy to 10 years in prison for something he happened to say in the course of an argument. So we also have put in appeal against that sentence, and we're at the same stage. We now are officially the lawyer, not we, but our lawyers in Nigeria are officially the lawyers that are taking forward those two cases. It looks like the governor is saying he will not give up until Yahya is executed. So if we're successful in the Court of Appeal in Kano, it will then go to the next court and eventually to the High Court. So whatever's going to happen, obviously if we lose, we're going to appeal again. And apparently if we win, the state will appeal again. So we expect that case, in fact, we expect both cases to go through to the Supreme Court in Nigeria.
Right.
Now, the downside for us in that is it's going to be very expensive. And we did do an appeal from funds, which was enough for us to write the appeal and file it and do all the preparations for that. But now we have the problem of prosecuting the appeals, and that's going to cost more money. So I am asking people, please, if you care about these things, go to our website, and there's a GoFundMe there for Yahya and for Umar. And if you could possibly, please, just give us some money towards that, it'll be enormously helpful.
Yeah, it's. I mean, all these things. I mean, we do need donations, and if you can donate and also become a member, that would be even better. But donations is what we need for these sort of things, because we don't earn money in any other way apart from donation. And lawyers do cost, and so we do need your help with that. So if you can do that, it'd be absolutely fantastic. If you can go to atheistalliance.org and you can donate on the website. So
because there's another issue here that is interesting, Andy, which is that Nigeria, although we've got 12 states which are Islamic and the remaining states which are Christian, they have a secular constitution. Yeah, they have a constitution which is very similar in many ways to the United States Constitution. It is not permissible for a state to adopt a state religion, but it's very clear that in the northern states where they have adopted Sharia as a criminal law code, they have adopted Islam as a state religion, and that is illegal. It's unconstitutional.
What's the sort of the other sort of pressure that either we as an organisation, atheists in general, or secularists or humanists in general, or just anybody who cares about this sort of thing? You know, you can be a theist and be completely against this sort of thing, blasphemy law and stuff like that. You know, in this sort of situation, what sort of things can people do to maybe put pressure on the Nigerian government?
Well, Nigerians, of course, can put pressure on their representatives in Parliament and Senate. So they can do that. They can talk about it in the newspapers. But you know what? This is a religious issue. And quite honestly, once you get into religion, reason goes out of the window very often. So people are defending their religion. They're not necessarily defending their actions legally because they can't.
Yeah.
Almost everything that happened to these two boys is not legal in terms of the Constitution, but it is legal in terms of the Sharia law, which they have in Kano. But if the Constitution says that things in Sharia law are illegal, then Sharia law should not be used.
Yeah, but there doesn't seem to be any consequence to this sort of action at all. There's no consequence from the government, is there?
Well, I think that one of the problems is that it is a very religious country, and the Constitution is abused not just by the Muslim states, but also by the Christian states.
Yeah,
so there's another case that we're also fighting, which is a case in Akwa Ibom state, where the governor has invested millions of public money, or was intending to, billions of public money into a huge cathedral. That you can't do that in Nigeria. It's a secular country. States cannot support religions. So we're prosecuting that case as well. That's been held up because of coronavirus, but hopefully we'll get back to that soon. So it's the situation really is the Christians don't want to challenge the Muslims, and the Muslims don't want to challenge the Christians because they're all at it. They're all breaking the Constitution. So it's like an old boys club where, well, we won't report you if you don't report us. That's how I see it anyway.
It's madness. It's madness. Anyway, listen, but we've hit our time, and we're going to do this on a regular basis, sort of few updates and talking about sort of building a secular world and the sort of things we can do to help that. So for the moment, thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy. Take care.
Now it's time to introduce my very, very special guest. This is Aroup Chatterjee, the author of the book, The Untold Story, which challenges the perceptions of Mother Teresa. Hi, Aroup. How you doing?
Hello. How are you? Yeah, good. Thanks.
I'm really good. It's really good to see you. Really great to have you on the podcast. And one of the things I wanted to do straight away was sort of congratulate you or thank you, in fact, for being part of our advisory council.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, it's a group of really, really cool people that work along with us, and it's really great to have you on board.
I'm no way I'm cool.
You are cool. You are cool. What are you talking about? In the introduction I did, I spoke a little bit about this concept of Mother Teresa and the stuff that went on at the time with in '93 when Christopher Hitchens sort of came out with that documentary, and pointed out quite rightly that you was the person who really was the catalyst to all that.
Yes.
So what was the sort of the backstory of that? What brought you to that point?
The backstory was after having come to the UK in 1985, as I have said many times, I had little interest in Mother Teresa. And what interest I had was entirely positive. I thought that she was a small-scale operator in a very big country, and she was doing something, i.e. feeding 50 people a day and looking after a few orphans here and there. But when I came to UK, I realized that she was telling bombastic lies. And every time I said to anybody that I was from Kakara, they were actually horrified. They expected somebody to be without limbs and, with leprosy, with nose and falling off their faces and things like that. And so I looked into all her ramblings, and I realized that all the lies actually came from her. So then I became convinced more and more so this realization came in about 1987, 88. So from then on, I became quite obsessed that I had to do something about it. Yeah, so in 1993 February, I went to Tariq Ali's production company called Bangdon Productions. It's folded up now; it doesn't exist anymore. Tariq Ali didn't pick up the phone. His assistant did, an American woman called Vania. So I told her in about 10 minutes what my idea was to do a film about Mother Teresa and her lies and her actual work. So she said, it looks like a good piece of something that they might do. So can I send them a proposal on an A4 sheet? So these were fax days, and I was quite into faxes in those days. So
yeah, I think a lot of people forget it's pre-internet, isn't it?
And it's still like, I still like the fax, but unfortunately it's not used anymore. I'm still a fax devotee. But anyway, so I wrote it up, typed it, and faxed it to her. And it's pre-internet, so no email, sorry, yeah. And she came back and said, yeah, idea is good. So I'm going to send it to Channel 4's commissioning editor. Channel 4's commissioning editor, Waldemar Januszczak. He's still around, actually. He's quite a cultural icon in UK still. So in about a week, the answer came from Waldemar Januszczak, who was then at Channel 4, that's fine, we will do a film, but we'll give you £30,000 for the film. I didn't get a single penny, by the way, make it very clear, which means 1,000 per minute is the, apparently that was the expenses in those days. But that would preclude traveling to any other place. It has to be entirely studio-based production. So yeah, that was good. That was that. So Hanya said that she knew somebody called Christopher Hitchens. I have to admit that I hadn't heard of him at the time. Obviously, I was quite young then, and I wasn't an active atheist or anything like that. So, well, I wasn't an inactive atheist, but I wasn't an active atheist. So anyway, so she said that she knew Christopher Hitchens from in the magazine Nation. They worked both of them together on it, and she would ask him to present the film because he's quite a intense presenter, and also the fact that he had written something on Mother Teresa in the past, which was quite neutral but critical. So he was asked to present the film. We did all the research and gave the materials to Christopher Hitchens, and he wrote it up and presented it. So that's the film was broadcast. It was called Hell's Angel, which wasn't my idea. I wanted to call it Mother of All Myths, but I think he chose the title, and he presented it, and that's the backstory. And the film they started doing it in March, I think, 93, and the film was shown in December, and that's the backstory of that. And then Hitchens wrote a book. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say. So when you come over in '85, what was your actual feeling of that? Because you had a sort of Mother Teresa was on the radar for you.
Just, I think I would say under the radar, and I wasn't unique. As I said, I grew up in a left, non-believing family. There was no talk about Mother Teresa being positive or negative, and I have gone back and asked all my friends in my middle class milieu. Every single person said the same thing, that they had no interest, no positive, no negative Mother Teresa. Obviously, many of my friends went to these convent schools because they are missionary-run schools, quite expensive, and they are very desirable in the Indian subcontinent, at least in India, because if you go there, you get a panache and a polish, and you learn to speak English very well. I couldn't speak English when I arrived in UK. I knew English to a high standard, but I couldn't speak it. Right. So I went to a standard school, but all my friends who from my class, people would probably go to a convent school, and those boys and girls said that they had heard of Mother Teresa much more than I had, but again, they didn't have any interest in her, or they didn't really know what she was doing, but they had much more awareness of her than I had.
So when you come over in '85 and you saw that the type of image that Mother Teresa was being portrayed as, and what she portrayed, but also what the media in the West and in the UK specifically was portraying of her, what was your opinion of that? How did that? What struck you about that?
Well, I was thunderstruck, and as a matter of fact, when I read some magazines or read a novel, I came across this metaphor. Oh, such and such would try the patience of Mother Teresa. Such and such is as pure as Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa would have been such and and then also in the opposite token, Calcutta would be also used as a metaphor. Oh, we don't want New York to become Calcutta. And I, to be honest with you, in the beginning, a couple of years, I didn't even understand what they were talking about. And I said, well, it sounds a bit odd. Why are they using these metaphors? Then I realized that how disgusting Calcutta had become in the imagery, and how supreme and noble Mother Teresa had become. So gradually,
was it because of her? Was it because of the way that she was being reported? And
yes, absolutely because of her. And in United States, when I read U.S. magazines or U.S. novels, or even watched Hollywood films, these metaphors were even more frequent and more intense. In UK, not so, but still, it happened.
Yeah, because I mean, when I grew up, I can remember people saying things like, if you ask someone to do something, and it was a charitable thing, or seemed like a charitable thing, you'd say something like, "Who am I, Mother Teresa?"
Exactly.
So it's become sort of a cultural phrase that is
figure of speech.
Yeah, it's just a figure of speech. It's such a strange thing. So, it's really, for you, it wasn't just that Mother Teresa was being lauded as some sort of saintly figure, but it was the concept that it was putting Calcutta down as well.
Yeah, my birthplace, and where the only place India I had known, actually, to be honest with you, because India is a big place, and although people in Calcutta do travel a lot, unlike people in other parts of India, but we are very parochial people in a sense that India is not. I mean, I'd be vilified by Indians for saying this, but it's not quite one country. It's very many different nations fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Now pretending to be great Hindu nationalists. But so I personally had no interest in other parts of India, no loyalty in other parts of India except to Calcutta, and to find my birthplace being vilified in such a brutal fashion really hurt me.
And when the actual the show came out, the Hell's Angel show came out, what was your feeling about that? And was it the sort of film that you wanted?
Well, I never watched it in one sitting down. It was very well presented. I must say, Hitchens presented it quite intensely, but it's okay. I mean, to do it in a studio and they covered a lot of ground. I didn't mind it at all. And what I did like was it actually opened the discussion.
Yeah. Because Hitchens can be quite incendiary sometimes, can't he?
Yeah, I think he was a bit restrained, bit incendiary. He struck a good chord. But saying that, there is an author called Mary Loudon, a novelist, and I think she writes nonfiction as well. 2 or 3 years before Hitchens, she wrote a very, very strong piece in The Observer about Mother Teresa, having worked there. And she said that, look, I went to India, to Calcutta, especially to work for this lady because I heard so much about her and about her charity. And I just couldn't believe how disgusting the whole thing was and how brutal it was. But unfortunately, nobody took any notice of it.
Yeah, because I think this whole thing about Mother Teresa's sort of status. I mean, you see her with, kings and politicians and all that sort of thing. She was with Princess Diana. It's like
numerous times.
People.
She was great friends with Ronald Reagan. I think in the Reagan White House, there was a special bedroom earmarked for her.
Right.
And there was a special entrance for her. She didn't just go through the regular entrance. And they came together because both were very strong anti-abortionists. So then Reagan had this obsession that abortion had to be banned in the world. And obviously Mother Teresa had the same thing. And they were
the Catholic
great
way.
buddies, greatest of buddies.
Yeah, it's so your book, The Untold Story.
Yeah.
When you started to, when did you start thinking about putting a book together about that?
1995, 96, 94, I think, 94. So, yeah.
And I know that, I've read the book and it's quite revealing because, as I say, at the time when I grew up, Mother Teresa was held up as a saintly figure. Consequently, she became a saint, and you had something to do with that. I want to go into that as well because that's really fascinating as well. But when you started putting that book together, because when did it come out? It came out sort of 2004 or something.
No, it did 2003. Yeah, quite right. That had a different title. Mother Teresa, the what was it called again?
Yeah, the Final Verdict.
Final Verdict. Sorry, yeah. And then the new edition with the new publisher is Untold Story. Correct.
Yeah, because but with when you started sort of going through that book and doing the research for it, again, we're talking sort of pre-internet days. It's not like you could just sit there and
very difficult,
Google
actually.
everything. You had to go
very
out
interesting, but very difficult.
that information, didn't you?
I had to spend hours and days in libraries and go all through the world. Actually travel the world and interview hundreds and hundreds of people. So and interview people on camera on the streets, etc., etc. It was fun. I wouldn't be able to do it now, but I did it at the time and I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, it's a bit of a young man's game and it's sort of trotting around the world.
Correct. Yeah, indeed.
Everybody. But what sort of came out of there? What was the stories about things like for the home for the dying and stuff like that in Calcutta?
Well, the thing is, I knew about it. The home for the dying was actually the home for the killing because there was nothing remotely charitable or kind about the place. It's slightly better now. At least there's some running water and etc. But in those days, there were no beds even. There still aren't any beds. There are hammocks.
Yeah.
First World War hammocks covered in a threadbare sheet. And the residents, it's only 100 of them, 90 in the men's section, 90 in the female section. And they're often half full. So think about only 60 people in the place. And the so-called care they get is absolutely unbelievable. They are not even allowed to get up and walk to stretch their limbs. I mean, they're really. There was a regime. There was a man called Anthony who was an overseer in that place, and who used to even hit them to make them lie down on the beds. When Mother Teresa was alive, it was the rule that needles had to be reused and gloves had to be reused in order to bring them closer to Jesus. Not that they were using so many needles, very few people needed needles, but whatever they needed had to be reused. The food was average, it was adequate. There was communal toilet. They had to often defecate in view of each other. It's unbelievable. Now it's much better. At least they've built walls, little partitions in the toilet so that people don't have to see each other when they're doing it. And in the women's section, as soon as the women came in, they were grabbed and the hair was shaved because the women obviously often carried lice and they didn't even want to give them lice treatment. So the treatment was just grab you and then shave your hair without even asking you whether you wanted or not.
So there was like a facade of care.
It wasn't even a facade. I mean, I don't know why when people went back, obviously, some people like Mary Loudon and one or two other people, they really made some noise. But most people it was the emperor's emperor's new clothes. They just kept quiet and they thought it was probably the greatest thing. Although they were obviously very shocked. Another of Mother Teresa's big lies is that she gave everybody a good funeral according to the religion. Complete nonsense. She had no part in the disposal of the bodies. The bodies were kept in a very dimly lit, a warmish morgue for a while, and then they're giving over to the Calcutta Corporation, who disposed of the bodies by everybody was cremated anyway. It still is. And Mother Teresa went around the world many, many times saying that I'm so respected for other religions. When people come to the home for the dying, I make sure that they get their funeral in their own religion. As a matter of fact, not even before the funeral. Anyway, most people didn't die there. They just came in and came out. Before the funeral, if a Hindu person had a image of a god or a goddess on his on the side of his bed, on the floor, the nuns would come and remove it because they're not allowed to have any non-Christian imagery in that place. So this is the brutality of the regime. And then Mother Teresa converted people who were unconscious by stealth. She had instructions to nuns if when people are dying and they're semi-conscious, go to them and say to them, this is a code. It's a code word. Do you want to enter the heavens through St. Peter's? And they would say, everybody said yes. And then that was a conversion. They sprinkled some water, and then she would send the number. So you had one more convert, and then it's a brownie point for Vatican for your. So this is what
this is what sort of has blew me away when I read your book, and also have read up about a lot of the stuff.
It's actually heinous to have to exploit vulnerable people like that.
Yeah,
it's quite
because her reasons for doing this was not to alleviate poverty or to help those people. It was she was working for the church, and she was working to convert, and that's what came over from your book, and also from a lot of the stuff that I read about this. And to me, that's sort of shocking, because it justifies the sort of brutality you're talking about. It justifies.
Everything is okay. The means are not important as long as you are looking at the end. So whatever you do to get to that end is fine. That was her mantra.
And she went around the world with sort of a begging bowl in some respects, and she was given literally millions and millions and millions of dollars. How much of that went to the poor?
Well, very little. I think probably less than 10%. Mostly it was for religion. She built huge nunneries and brothers' homes and sisters' homes. And then she had an obsession with having travel, moving the nuns from A to B very frequently. In Calcutta itself, there are huge nunneries which have no charitable functions. They're fully religious places, and then they recruit from the villages, not from actually Calcutta state, West Bengal. Very few of the nuns the Mother Teresa has come from the local state.
Right.
Probably 1 to 2%, if that. Most of them come from South India and from Bihar. So consequently, none of the nuns can speak the local language, and so that is a big hindrance in them helping the local people, because they have no local knowledge. They haven't got the local language. They're very aloof, and also they are not even interested in helping people that much, because they know that they're there to make a living. And it is well known, it's unbelievable again, but when donations come from abroad in kind, like shirts and food and baby food and toys, they're sold by the nuns in the second-hand market in Calcutta almost instantaneously.
Just to get money. I mean, that money, how much money do you think went to the Vatican?
I actually don't know. I'm not an accountant, and I just couldn't by myself look into that money angle. But I would think that about 50% went to the Vatican. Well, her main bank is the Vatican Bank again, which is the scandalous and scandal-ridden bank. She has some accounts in the Indian banks as well for day-to-day things, but all the international donations she could keep in a UK bank or even an Indian bank, which are pretty stable. But she kept in the Vatican Bank, so nobody knows what goes on there except for lots of scandalous things.
Because the actual, I mean, there's been a lot about the sort of care of people within those homes. That
indeed, yeah, and the selling of orphans.
This is another thing. Tell me about this, because this again is something that sort of blows your mind when you read about it.
Indeed, absolutely. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the thing is that when there was a program on Calcutta TV in 2004. There was this boy who was adopted to Belgium to a Catholic couple. He was sold for 1 lakh rupees, 100,000 rupees, a lot of money in those days, even in pounds and dollars.
Yeah.
And his sister was sold also. One of the sisters, and he he was, when he looked at his papers, he found that he was classed as an orphan, that he had nobody. But he knew that obviously he was adopted at a older age. He was 7 or 8 at the time,
Right.
and he remembered, obviously he had an older sister, he had grandmother, so he was quite appalled. So he kept coming back to Calcutta and trying to find his sister, saying that because he was convinced the sister was probably still alive. And then he managed to look at his papers in Mother Teresa's so-called orphanage, and he realized that everything had been falsified and false signatures, and his antecedents and his family tree was falsified as well. And he had effectively was sold to a Catholic couple. So that was and this program was shown 2 or 3 times on Calcutta TV. But because Indians are scared of Mother Teresa and scared of the Catholic Church and scared of West, essentially, nobody did anything. Nobody took any notice. People chose to ignore it. But then 3 years back, it suddenly came out that they were selling babies and orphans on a very large scale. And Missionaries of Charity was one of the biggest sellers of orphans and babies. So the cases are still going on. Unfortunately, the nun herself, the Nobel Prize winner, she's dead, but she was in it hand in glove. Hand in glove, she was involved in the selling of babies and orphans. So that had gone on for 30 years. Can you believe this? I mean, it's unbelievable that people have chosen to respect and adulate such a person. Now it's very difficult to do anything dodgy with adoptions in India because the law is very strict at the moment.
Yeah.
You have to first offer the child to an Indian couple, and even after you have gone through all the options of adoption in India, only then you can adopt to a non-Indian couple. So now the Missionaries of Charity have stopped adopting anyway because of all the scandals, etc. And then also they said that because now Indian government, I think, has technically allowed same-sex adoption, they said it's against God's will, so we're not going to do it. So this is Mother Teresa's another legacy: selling of children and orphans.
It sort of blows your mind that there must have been people within the church who knew this was going on, and wherever you come from, wherever your background, whatever whether you're a theist or a non-theist,
I know, but exactly,
it's got to cut against the grain, surely.
Yeah, why would not somebody of the thousands and hundreds of people who came across this organization, raise some kind of, I don't know what's the politically correct word now. They say, whistleblower. Sorry, whistleblow at some point. Nobody did. And Mother Teresa's nuns were obviously instrumental in all this. They were the minions. She was the one who was giving the orders. But they are very uneducated. They are very uneducated women. She chose women of that sort of that kind. And
well, I saw you on a TV program, a British TV program, Sunday morning, where you was talking about this, and there was a nun, a current nun. I mean, this is probably a few years ago now, but there's a current nun, and she was she was talking about the whole process, Mother Teresa, all those things, and protecting the Catholic Church, and saying that this didn't happen. The things that you were talking about, some of the things you were speaking about today, was they just deny it, and it almost seems like they're sort of brainwashed into thinking a certain way, and completely blinkered to the horror behind it.
I know Indians are the same. I mean, I'm talking about non-Christian Indians. They are totally blinkered. They're not, and they're very scared. I don't know why they're always very scared about everything. They're particularly scared about Mother Teresa and her connections. They're Indians. The subcontinent people see conspiracy in everything. So if Mother Teresa is so powerful, she has a huge network of conspiracy behind her. So if I say something might happen to me, and it's that sort of mentality, really.
Well,
so
I mean, let's talk about some of those connections, Aroup. People like Baby Dr. Valier.
Yeah.
I mean, how can someone like that, who's portrayed as, well, how she is, being in contact? I mean, 1980, that she got the Haitian Legion of Honor Award from Baby Doc, and Baby Doc is known to have sort of killed and tortured, I don't know, 30,000
No, he
Haitians.
used to kill his opponents and feed them to the dogs. Sometimes he used to put them in the same cage as wolves and dogs and things, so that he would watch. And don't forget Imelda Marcos, another of our biggest donors and friends. I mean, these are the sort of people who loved her, and she loved them. And Ronald Reagan, even, I mean, he never made any secret of the fact that he hated the poor, and he loved the rich. And Mother Teresa was absolutely fond of him, without any compunction, without anything. Pinochet, she never actually. I don't think she ever met Pinochet, but Pinochet was a fan also. So anybody who would be, it doesn't matter how brutal you would be, as long as you are a strong Catholic and you oppose abortion, that's fine. There was an American priest, Californian priest called Donald McGuire, who was Teresa. I think he used to take confessions from Teresa nuns. He was associated with the Mission of Charity, and he was rumbled up as a pedophile. So he was convicted and charged, and Mother Teresa wrote a letter saying that he should be reinstated and allowed to resume work as a priest. So this is sort of, I mean, she knew very well that what he had done, and now I think he died in prison, or he's maybe still in prison.
It's almost as if like the church has no care for humanity at all,
Absolutely.
as long as it propagates the Catholic Church.
Absolutely. That was Mother Teresa's remit completely. That as long as you propagate the political views of the Catholic Church, i.e. that we are the standard bearer of world, whatever, the morals of the world, and however you do it, it doesn't matter. We just have to go out and do it.
Ends justify the means. She was also sort of in alignment with Charles Keating, who's he was probably the biggest fraudster in American history at the time.
Until that time, he was.
Yeah.
Now I think it's that man who went to prison with 2008 after him. But until that time, and also Charles Keating, what his modus operandus was, he would defraud very modest customers, like he would, carpenters and builders and plumbers. He would take their money and just run away with it. So he gave his private jet to Teresa, and she would quite happily hop around in it. When Keating was arrested, the New York's district attorney wrote to her saying that, would you be kind enough to at least consider refunding some of the money that Keating gave you? I think he gave her 75 million or something. No, sorry, I can't remember. In those days, probably 2 or 3 million. Yeah. So would you be kind enough to refund some of the money so that the small investors can be reimbursed? And they never got a reply. So, but when the case went to court, Lance Ito, the judge who heard that famous, that man who killed the wife, the chappie. Anyway, so he's very famous. He became a very famous judge. He sat on a very famous case subsequently, Lance Ito. So Mother Teresa wrote a personal letter to the judge, Lance Ito, saying that, can you let Charles Keating go, because he's a great man and he's a God's man, and he loves God and he loves me. So don't punish him. So this is how she was. No.
It is amazing, really, isn't it?
No ethics, no morals, nothing.
So the other thing that I wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about was the sainthood, or the beatification and the canonization of Mother Teresa. And she was brought in as devil's advocate. Now, I've known that phrase for many, many years. Where if you're a devil's advocate, you sort of take an opposite position, that sort of thing. Yeah. But this is an actual official Vatican position.
Yeah.
And it was yourself and Christopher Hitchens that became devil's advocate in her canonization.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit of background about how, because this fascinates me, how this actually, the
Well,
process.
yeah, it was. I think it went on for more than 2 days. It was a whole series of hundreds of questions about her and what I thought about her and what she did, what she didn't do, etc., etc. It was heard by a canon law expert, a lady. I can't remember her name. And the questions, I've reproduced some of the questions in my book, as far as I could remember, because it was pre-camera phone days. So otherwise, I could have taken a picture.
Yeah.
So it was, it was some factual questions, some subjective answers, that kind of thing. But the ultimate was, do you think Mother Teresa should be a saint? I think that was towards the end. I said, yes, of course she should be a Catholic saint. The Catholic saint is somebody who respects or abides by Catholic dictum and diktat and hierarchy and follows the rules of the Catholic Church, which to me are quite negative and odious. But she did that very faithfully. So she should be a Catholic saint. But if you ask me whether she should be called a saint in the secular broad sense, definitely not. Yeah, she lied extensively. She lied every day of her life for the last 30 years of her existence. She didn't care about the poor. She deliberately reused needles. She lied in the Nobel Prize acceptance speech about the number of people she helped. She converted surreptitiously people who were semi-conscious. So definitely, in the broader sense, she shouldn't be called a saint. But obviously, Catholic Church is a company or an organization, and somebody who serves that organization with exemplary devotion, they have a right to make them their biggest asset, and that asset is called a saint. So so go ahead and make her a saint.
She's been sort of famously quoted as saying things like, when people are in pain, they weren't given painkillers or very, very light painkillers, and she said pain means Jesus is near you.
Yeah, it's kissing you. Yeah,
it's kissing you. It
but
just
I
begs
know.
belief, doesn't it?
And people would go completely wow over it, as if it's a great thing to say. But then, if you look at her own self, she went to the best hospitals in the world.
Yeah, very.
In Calcutta, she went to Woodlands Hospital, Bellevue Clinic. In the wider world, she went to La Jolla, California. She went to Scripps Clinic, very expensive. In Italy, she went to the Gemelli Hospital in Rome. So for herself, nothing was spared, but for her residents, nothing was given.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, there was a quote that Hitchens put in to one of his writings, one of his essays or whatever, that he said it was by talking to her that he discovered that, and she assured him that she wasn't working to alleviate poverty. She was working to expand the number of Catholics.
In the world.
She said, I'm not a social worker. I don't do it for that reason. I do it for Christ. I do it for the church. And it sort of says it all, really, doesn't it?
She said that many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that look, why are you looking at my charitable functions? Because I'm not a charity. I'm not a charity worker. I'm not a social worker. I'm a religious person. And people thought that she was. Unfortunately, people actually didn't look. Although that was the truth, people thought she was so humble that she was just underplaying her charity, and that was even a greater sign of her humility and her charitable work.
Yeah.
So that's how it was interpreted.
Yeah, it is an absolutely fascinating story, and I encourage everybody to read your book, Mother Teresa, The Untold Story. It's a fascinating insight into it, and it will change your mind about Mother Teresa. And if you're brave,
and also I think it should change people's mind about media and reportage and journalism. When I first wrote the book, when I first came out, then I thought that it should be a book that journalists should read. That how you should approach any issue with a slightly open mind.
Yeah.
And now it's much better. I mean, I must say that people these days journalists are much more open-minded. But the Mother Teresa bandwagon and the publicity mostly came from US. And I think personally, many US journalists who did come to Calcutta and look at the work, they were quite horrified. But because their sponsors and their editors and their newspaper houses were dependent on advertisements and sponsors and their owners, they just couldn't do anything. Like I remember reading an article in the Ladies' Home Journal, which was very, very big. It was, I think, a bit like Cosmopolitan, actually, in those days. But Daphne Barak, who was quite a well-known journalist at the time, she was. It was quite obvious, even reading through the lines, that she was pretty unimpressed by the Teresa thingy, but she just couldn't say anything properly. So that's something I hope has changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that if anybody's listening to this who is I don't know, a supporter of Mother Teresa or a theist that believes in what Mother Teresa does or has done, because it's been like 23 years now since she died.
Yeah.
We're still talking about it because it's a big thing. But I think what I want is for people to to read your book, go out and get it, read your book, understand the background of it.
Indeed, absolutely.
And sort of understand.
I mean, even, yesterday I read an article on a website called townhall.com. It may be a right-wing website, I'm not sure. And the headline was, "We have to remember that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was no Mother Teresa." Yesterday. Can you believe that?
I know. It sort of blows you away, doesn't it? This legacy. And this is one of the reasons why I say, it's important to understand. It's important to understand what her true motives were.
Correct.
Because it does change your mind about this concept of what Mother Teresa was, and sort of blows away those cobwebs.
No, but this is important because the author of this piece about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she probably was born after Mother Teresa died.
Yeah.
So still she had this total metaphor or figure of speech ingrained in her mind, that she used it in the headline. Yeah,
it does sort of blow you away. Listen, Aroup, it's been brilliant talking to you. We've come to the end of our little section here. It's been fantastic talking to you. Yep, thanks, Aroup. That was the wonderful Aroup Chatterjee. Okay, that's it for today. If you want to follow the podcast, then make sure you jump over to the Atheist Alliance International YouTube channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello. Next time, my special guest is going to be Thomas Sheedy. Now, he's the founder of Atheists for Liberty, and we're going to be talking about his organisation and his views on the state of atheism in a very divided and divisive world. So tune in to the next AAI podcast. If you want to support Atheist Alliance International, then pop over to our website. That's the atheistalliance.org, and consider donating and becoming a member. We can only carry out the important work that we do with your help, and the work we do is obviously assisting atheists in desperate situations all around the world, and we can only do it genuinely with your help. And so we'll see you next time, and remember, we're risen apes, not fallen angels. See you next time.
Atheist Alliance International Podcast with Andy Phillips.